And just jump around. I'm very excited to have Tannis and Rachel here today when we're talking about pediatric clinical trials and what services are available in the clinical research unit. Tannis is the executive director of the clinical research unit. And if she could have a pet that isn't a dog or a cat, it would be a hamster, and if not a hamster, a hedgehog. And Rachel is a project manager for the CRU, and she doesn't have to have a what if because she actually owns miniature potbelly pigs as pets. So she already, blew my icebreaker question out of the water. So we're going to get started, and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, I think it is. Well, I'd like to first of all thank Sokra for inviting us to make this presentation today and share some information about the CRU and Children's Hospital Research Institute. And thank you, Lauren, for the lovely introduction. Rachel and I will be kind of going through this presentation together, so we'll be handing off the mic during part of it. So we're going to, I got to do this too. Today we're going to learn a little bit about the research services that we provide for pediatric studies in Manitoba, as well as look at some of the elements that are required for preparedness for clinical research. So CRIM was established initially in 2001. It was originally called the Manitoba Institute of Child Health. It is the research arm of the Children's Hospital Foundation of Manitoba. In 2015, we were rebranded as the Children's Hospital Research Institute of Manitoba to more coincide with the name of the foundation. And our overall mission is to improve the health of infants, children, youth, maternal health, and society by creating an environment that attracts and retains the best scientists and clinicians. We are the first research unit dedicated to pediatric research in the Prairie provinces. There are others that have followed suit, but in 2001 we were the first. Currently we have over 270 medical researchers, both in the basic science field and clinical field, working with us, and we conduct research that's valued at over $10 million per year. So we're very large. We're in the John Buehler Research Center next door. We hold the 5th and 6th floors. On the 6th floor is our basic science units, and that's all of our wet labs and our animal holding facilities. And on the 5th floor is our clinical research unit, as well as a number of offices and other research spaces that are used for clinical trials. Our overall reason for being is to foster clinical research and foster collaborative and innovative research in Manitoba. Our vision is to be the leading contributor to science and knowledge through discoveries, and we hope that the Institute will improve the quality of life for infants, children's, youth, and maternal health. Rachel will now talk about some of the specifics of the services we provide in the unit.
I'm sure that sounds great to everybody who's listening online. Right. So the CRU, or the Clinical Research Unit, is part of CRIM, and so we're based on the 5th floor of the John Buehler Research Center. There. And so our focus is to be supporting researchers, and we do that through offering a multitude of services. So projects that we currently have on the go are industry sponsored or investigator initiated. We do a range of projects from repositories, retrospective chart reviews, all the way to clinical trials with investigative products. And there's lots of observational trials as well. And so it's all the way from prenatal to adult. Most of our research is, of course, focused on children. There are some where it's been a longitudinal study that has followed people into adulthood, or adults are part of some of our trials as well. So we recruit in the Children's Hospital, in the wards and the clinics, in the Children's Hospital Emergency Department, and sometimes offsite as well. So we've partnered with Sky on a few projects as well, and other hospitals. We coordinate with them. So our unit is staffed with a multidisciplinary team with all kinds of expertise. We have our executive director and a program manager. We have a medical director who's joined us as well. We have our regulatory and quality coordinator who's joined us as well. And we have research coordinators, both with a nursing background and different backgrounds. We also have research assistants at varying levels, as well as a few additional people who provide services like sonography and DEXA scan, things like that. So that's our team. We also have a pool of casual staff, so casual research nurses or RAs, and we use them on a project-to-project basis. So we have over 80 active trials right now that we participate in some capacity in the CRU, so we've been growing a lot in the past year, and we're very happy to be doing that. It's been an adventure and it's taught us lots of things. And so our projects have grown as well, so it ranges from a single site to multi-site trials, with some trials having one participant and some having over 1,000. So it's really, we have the capacity to be providing services to a range of trials. So there's nothing's too little, nothing's too big. So in our facility, we have examination space, we have meeting space, we also have secure drug and storage, sample storage, we have a basic lab, we have the DEXA scanner, ultrasound machine, and blood pressure, some of the basic equipment that you would need. So at times we have visits for studies happening on site, and sometimes they are happening in other places as most convenient and effective for the participants. So whatever the format, we try to make it work, and we have these facilities that are available. So we sort of have divided up our services into some pre-study services, during study services, post-study services, and some sort of sporadic services that are offered as well. So we are, when a researcher can come to us at any point in their study. However, please, if you're interested in using our services, it's really important to come earlier, because then we can sort of help to make sure that things are going to be running smoothly, that you've got a good budget, that you've got the participant pool that you need, and other things that can help make a trial successful. So we look at study feasibility, we do some budget development or consultation, some negotiation for budgets, and then contract reviews and contract facilitation, working in collaboration with the Office of Research Services at the University of Manitoba and with HSC. So we also help with account setup. So if you've got discrepancy and you're not quite sure how to get your hands on that money, we can help. We have REB submission support. We have impact submission support. We can help get access to the data that you're looking for. We can help with HIPC submissions, Health Canada submissions. We also do quite a bit of document development, so the nuts and bolts of what you'll need to actually run this. So that's consent forms, case report forms, assents, all those different pieces that maybe at the idea stage you haven't gotten to all of that. We can help with those, the creation of those. We also support site selection visits. So if there's a trial and somebody's coming to take a look to see if we are a good site, we can help with that. So organizing tours of the pharmacy, of the lab, of our site, and being a point of contact for those folks. One thing I did want to mention is, so we work closely with the hospital and with the university, and so of the impact submissions for pediatric research, since 2014, 50% of the pediatric research impact submissions at the Children's Hospital are from researchers who are involved with the CRU. So that's just one piece of information to sort of demonstrate how we're involved.
And most other ones are from cancer.
Right.
We do the vast majority of the studies that are actually outside of the cancer care field.
Yeah, just for the benefit of those who may be listening online, our medical director and chair of the impact committee just said that most of the other studies are from cancer care. So we are involved in the bulk of the pediatric research that's happening. So during the study, we can do full study coordination. That includes site-specific coordination, and we are developing and have done multi-site coordination as well. And we've got coordinators who've got decades of experience, and I can't speak highly enough about them. They're great. So that is a big asset to people, especially if your portfolio of research doesn't necessarily warrant a full-time employee or part-time employee. This way is workable for a lot of researchers who are maybe just getting started or don't have a giant portfolio of research.
And maybe you're gonna get to this, but is there are costs associated with using this?
Yeah, we'll
let
get
me
to
know
that.
if you're getting
Yeah, we'll talk about money. Don't worry, that's a big part of actually operationalizing some of this stuff. So we also do the screening, consenting, and enrolling. We do study visits and everything that could be included with that, including dispensing drug and monitoring for side effects, things like that. We do data collection, data entry. We do query management, that kind of thing as well. And so we do study status reporting and adverse event reporting. Things that you need with samples, we do that as well. We won't necessarily always do that stuff in-house. We will look for the best way, most cost-effective, least impact on the participant way to collect the samples that are needed for research. And we do that in collaboration with shared health research services. We can do invoice and fund management. Like, I could read all of these ones, but so can you. Essentially, what we aim to do is be a one-stop shop. And if we can't provide services in-house, we help researchers get access to that. So for post-study services, we do the query management, we do the closeout with our REB. We also do the archiving and storage of your study materials. And if that's with a sponsor site closure visits and sending back any drug, stuff like that. So we aim to be a one-stop shop, but we're not aiming to duplicate the other services that are provided elsewhere. And one of those partners is CHI. And so there are lots of good services available through CHI. And so we don't duplicate, we will work with researchers to access the services that are available elsewhere. And some of those include database and statistical support, protocol development and trial design, patient engagement, and knowledge translation. We also work with HSC and UMM research services and with their contracts offices. We work with shared health, so with their research, pharmacy, with their lab, and with electronic medical records and paper charts as well. And then in the future, we're looking to develop some more resources and to be filling in some of the gaps. So looking at patient engagement support that's specific to pediatrics and looking at quality management programs. So like I said, there's some sporadic services that we offer as well, and those are services like phlebotomy or sonography or DEXA scan, things like that. And those are offered at cost basis essentially. So for investigator-initiated trials, those are we charge for the staff time and for the equipment maintenance, and that's it. So we're not looking to turn a profit on investigator-initiated studies. We also have the ability to be supporting researchers who have hired staff who would like there to be sort of a community of practice around their staff, even though their staff are dedicated to their research. So we can have a hand in some of the onboarding and some of the training. Staff that are specific to researchers are also welcome to be part of our staff meetings and sort of operate under our umbrella and our support, although being dedicated to a researcher. So that can be sometimes very valuable to researchers who can't necessarily devote that kind of time to training their staff. and need that support, and we're here to offer that as well. There are opportunities to negotiate some fee schedules for some of our sporadic services as well. So we have an intake process, pretty straightforward. We've got a form that's asking for several fields to be filled out. This is designed both to get as much information from the investigator at the onset as possible, but also to sort of twig the thinking around those issues. So perhaps an investigator hasn't necessarily considered the contracts or one piece or another, and so it's meant to sort of be a prompt in that regard. And then we review it internally within the CRU. We are going to be reviewing the form itself and anything that's attached to it. We'll do sort of a cursory review for feasibility, and there's more feasibility things that Tannis will discuss later. We'll look at our staffing, at our expertise, and then sort of get straight what sort of resources are required. We draft up an MOU, and then we meet with the PI. And during that meeting, we discuss the services. We do some initial problem solving of some of the logistics that we may have discovered, and then we both sign off on it. So we do this to ensure that there is clear delineation of responsibilities, so nothing is missed and like, oh, I thought you were doing it. Oh, you were doing it. We want to avoid making those kinds of assumptions, and so we have used this process. The process for the sporadic services is about the same too. So if you just need DEXA scans, there's an intake for that. No, we don't do like a whole feasibility review. It's not needed. So here's our cost framework. So services for investigator-initiated trials is at a cost recovery basis. So that's just whatever staff time is required, we will bill your study. And so that's for their salary plus benefits is what we're covering there. For industry-funded trials, there's a different fee schedule based on the difference in funding. And then some new researchers who've never accessed us can have 10 hours of complementary support. That's to help them get started. This works well for researchers, like I say, who don't necessarily have enough research to hire their dedicated staff, or the budget's really tight. And so because we're just spending the time that's needed and we have staff trained already, it can be a financially responsible way to go about staffing your study. I'm going to hand it over to Tannis to talk about this video.
So a little bit more on the feasibility, because this is such a key element to the success of trials. Just to get a sense of who's in the room, how many people are themselves investigators? Okay, and how many people are research assistants or research support for investigators? Predominantly everybody else. And how many fits into the other category? Do we have students, trainees? Okay, and then other university employees? Really? Okay, good. So just kind of get a sense. So some of this won't be geared to you because some of these are PI responsibilities, but it gives you a sense of all the kinds of elements that are needed to be considered when we're doing a study, and it'll maybe lead to sort of a better understanding of why we ask all these questions. So our feasibility study is meant to ensure that trials are well designed and they're likely to be successful and important to child health. So our main goal in the CRU is to make sure that every investigator that we support is successful. We want them to have a successful trial or study. We want them to have a successful academic career and have the experience to be really good. We don't want anyone to have a negative research experience because we really want to support and continue to enhance all the research that's done in Manitoba. So some of the things that we look at is child health or clinical care impact. So is this going to have an impact on how children are cared for in the future? Is it going to make the treatments more agreeable? Is it going to find a more effective medication for children? All of those kinds of things go into it. we look at protocol considerations. There's a little bit more I'll say about that in general, but does the protocol seem reasonable? Is it reasonable to expect that it can be conducted in our healthcare settings currently, or that we would be able to engage participants in willing to be part of these trials? We look at validating the enrollment potential. So there's certain inclusion and exclusion criteria for every study. Do we have the patient population that meets these? Do we have enough kids with a certain disease category or a certain response to treatment category? Is the budget reasonable? We have experienced this time and time again where we have a lot of screen failures, so we interact with a lot of clients and they don't agree to participate in the study, so that takes a lot of staff time and it can eat up a budget considerably. So we want to make sure that the budget is sound enough and is sufficient enough to allow for these kinds of consultations, as well as the startup. A lot of people don't appreciate all the documents that are required for ethics, and rightly so, because we want to, to show the ethics board that we've considered all of the things that are important to child health. Our focus always first is the children. So everything that we do, setting up the protocol and all of the ethics requirements and contracts requirements, are to ensure child safety as we're doing research. Make sure we've got the staff with the right kind of qualifications. If we don't, do we need to go find these staff? Do we have the supplies, the equipment that's required, the facility consideration? So sometimes we may require an infusion of medications for a particular study. So we have to work with our partners at Health Sciences Center to make sure that we have the ability to go to the day unit in the pediatric hospital and get a bed for them to have these infusions. Sometimes they require a biopsy. So our surgeons on board, if they require a specific diagnostic test, can we get them into an EEG machine? All of those kinds of things. And then there's just study-specific factors. If there's any really quirky exclusion or inclusion criteria, if there's any really significantly complicated lab procedures or things that have to happen, we have to make sure that shared health can accommodate these. So there's lots of things to consider, and we have to talk to our partners, in whether it be in the investigative pharmacy department or whether it be in shared health. So when a researcher comes to us, some of the things we ask them to have clearly developed in their mind is, do you have a population in mind? Do you have a well-defined population? Age group, gender, disease type, failure to respond to other medications, contributing factors, whatever the case may be. Is your intervention or your data elements, are they clearly defined? Do you know what you want to do? Do you know the kind of data that you want to capture? Do you have a comparison group in mind? So do you have a control group so that you can show through statistical analysis that your treatment or your drug protocol is going to be either non-inferior or superior to something else that's currently being used? And what's the outcome? What's the outcome that you're hoping to achieve? Is it response to medication? Is it slowing down of disease progression, symptom management, whatever it is? So we want to make sure that all of these things, they may not have to be developed in a full-on protocol, but that they're well-defined, and at least the investigators started to write down these things. If they need help with protocol development, that's when we go to our friends at CHI and say, we've got some clinical trialists there. These are the people that you need to help. We don't have that kind of experience. We're not at that level, but we know who to point them to. Trials can be industry-sponsored or investigator-driven, just so that everyone's clear about the two differences. We talk about salary rates for industry, salary rates for investigator-driven. So industry sponsors, usually pharmaceutical trials or device manufacturer trials. And they come with a particular budget. Either they can be single site or multi-site. Quite often we're one of numerous sites. They can also be investigator driven. So that is usually an investigator has an idea, they go to a research foundation or another funding body like CIHR or NSER. They get their funding and either they do it at a single site or then they find collaborators in other sites and they do multi-sites. So there's various ways that a study can be designed. So all of those kinds of things need to be clearly laid out when the investigator is mapping out everything. We want to make sure that the outcomes are feasible. They're interesting, they're novel, they're ethical, and they're relevant. So are you studying something that the patient population is currently facing? We want to make sure that we are either doing trials on investigator treatments or quality improvement trials for care in the hospital that are relevant, that we don't already have answers for in the literature, or it's relevant to our site and our patient population.
I'll just interject where investigators have a great understanding to a point of these outcomes. It's really good to get the perspective of other people, the patient population, those colleagues, other stakeholders, or the operational staff. That can really inform the quality of these outcomes.
Therefore, my next slide. We would encourage the investigators to either have had conversations with these types of folks, or we would then be able to find people in these categories that perhaps could help them. So if they need statisticians to determine sample size, because somebody needs to be able to help you determine the sample size calculations, co-investigators, so that can be people in other sort of allied health fields here in Manitoba, or would it be co-investigators at other sites? Patient partners are very important. We are now growing our contacts with patient partners, but we also have a number of patient partners that are available through CHI. We cannot stress how important it is when we're looking at the feasibility of the study, when we talk about whether it's novel and interesting and important. What does the patient population say? What do either, if they're older children, what do the children say themselves, or what do the parents of the children who have this condition, or general patients who've experienced healthcare in general? What are the things that are important to them? And we've been involved in a couple of studies where we've had such good success, and consent forms and scripts when we're talking to patients about some difficult things. We've actually amended and adopted all of the suggestions that the patient partners have made, because their viewpoint and their outlook is so, so important. So we've got lots of really good, it does take time. We are not saying that this doesn't take time. This is a key thing to do upfront, because it can help you save a lot of work. Don't do it after you've got all your consent forms written and everything else. Do it earlier on, because they can save, these kind of consultation can save a lot of time. Operational staff, if you've got a treatment protocol, and the investigator has it in their mind that they should be able to do this, this, and this, and this. Is this feasible in the NICU? Is it feasible in the emergency department that's super busy and all kinds of codes and things could be happening at the same time? So we can work with the people who have that operational expertise and tweak things just to make sure that it's operationally effective, but it's also scientifically important and can meet your goals. Delegation of tasks, so identifying who could do what, because the investigator themselves doesn't have to do everything. They don't have to be the super person in a study. You can have a team of people. We invite researchers to rely on us. My time and Rachel's time for consultation on studies is not charged to any study. That is something that we are there as a support group for studies. So anyone wants to come and talk to us, bounce ideas off of us, look for partners, none of that time is charged to the researcher. So all of that kind of stuff, that the upfront help is all just there for researchers to take advantage of. There's different ways as people are starting studies to communicate with partners, and also there may be other committees that they can tap into in the organizations that we work with. So we ask that the investigators be prepared to develop their protocols, their monitoring plans, especially for drug interventions. We want to be able to have a process to track adverse drug reactions as well as just adverse experiences. Some may or may not be related to drugs, but we like to be able to track all of those kinds of things. A data management plan, if they're going to have a database developed, especially a really sophisticated one where you're going to have a statistician come on board and analyze it. So you want to have that person involved up front early so they can help you design the database so that it meets all of their needs, rather than you trying to get data that the statistician needs later, and that never works out really well. Like Rachel mentioned earlier, we can help create case report forms if you haven't got that created, consent and assent forms. There's also pharmacy forms and things like that for getting drug out of, our investigator drugs out of the pharmacy. So there's things like that that have to be developed, as well as all the logs that we require for monitoring and quality purposes. So delegation logs, training logs, screening logs. So we, as we really get into our data, our quality management program within this CRU, we put all those things in place, pretending that we were going to be a study that could at any time be audited by Health Canada. And there's very few of our studies that really require Health Canada approval or are potentially subject to Health Canada audit, but we want to pretend and prepare for that kind of thing. And that way, by having all those checks and balances in place, that's one way that we can assure to our investigators that everything that we're doing is of the highest quality and standard, to make sure that all of our people are properly trained in procedures, and anybody who's involved in the study has received the proper training, whether as an intake of our staff in general, everybody has to have GCP and ICP in Division 5 and FIA and all of that kind of training, that's just our base standard. But then there's a lot of protocol training and perhaps different training that's required for each study. So we want to make sure that all of that is done adequately and then recorded. So there's lots of things that we do internally, like I said, to make us ready to pretend as if we were having a Health Canada audit at any time. And now it's back to Rachel.
Right. Full credit, this is not I did not develop this. This is from the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to share it with folks because recruitment planning, specifically for recruitment, is often overlooked, but it has a huge impact on the success of a trial. Up to 86% of clinical trials do not meet their recruitment targets within the allotted time frame. And that is something that we are seeing in our experience at the CRU is recruitment is an issue. And without participants, we're not going to have a trial that yields any useful results. So the ideas are great, everything else might be in place, but until there is specific attention given to this, you just want to pay attention. So taking time to consider recruitment and a recruitment strategy overlaps with the preparedness for clinical trials because a well-designed trial is more likely to have a recruitment success. So they divided the recruitment strategy design essentially into 3 parts. So one is the trial design and the protocol development. So we talked about some of these things, but I want to emphasize that engaging all stakeholders is not the same as just engaging your team. So if you develop a core team that's going to be working on your trial, that's likely not going to include all stakeholders, and it's likely not going to include more than one of your stakeholders. And having the perspective from healthcare providers, from systems planners, from the folks who fund our healthcare system, and from the public can be essential in designing a trial that is going to be effective. You want to ensure the relevance of the scientific questions, and you want to limit the complexity to reduce the burden, and that I see that paired with the optimization of data collection and realistic eligibility criteria. So sometimes people don't want to limit their data fields, don't want to limit the complexity of their trial, and that's understandable. We want lots of information, and we want complex solutions to complex problems, and healthcare is complex. However, we still need those participants. So taking the time to really think carefully about what is it that we're after, what information can we get, where can we get it, and is it important to patient partners is important. The eligibility criteria, things like considering if it would be something that your child would be okay with. So let's say in order to participate in a trial, a participant would have to stop using the drugs that they're using to manage their health care issue. As a parent, would you say yes to that if your child was going to participate? And for a lot of folks, that's no, because that medication they're taking for a reason, and it's helping them with their life and with their healthcare issue. So just being really realistic about those kinds of things can help with the recruitment. Trial feasibility and site selection. Tannis talked about feasibility, so I won't say too much about it, other than she has a few copies of the feasibility assessment here, so you're welcome to take a look at it. We're just in the initial stages of developing that, so there's, I'm not going to say that it's your gold standard, but I will say it's a really good start. You want to have realistic metrics and milestones to keep the trial on track, because this is a good way to also identify a problem. And so instead of waiting until the problem is this huge issue, if you have some milestones and those aren't being met, it's an opportunity for you to say, there's a problem here, let's address it, and let's get ahead of it before we're just reacting to something. Adequate budget and resources, that's essential. I can't say enough about that. I encourage investigator-initiated projects to take a page from industry trials and being careful about site selection. And so to move beyond, oh, I've got a willing collaborator at another site, to look at, is it actually feasible at that site? And to willing to get creative about that. And so when it comes to recruitment, communication, and planning, this is another spot to engage your stakeholders. And this is, you can really get creative, and you can integrate knowledge translation and patient engagement studies within your bigger trial. So you can identify who are our participants, where are they getting their information, how are they going to receive information in the optimal way for them. And so that's not necessarily in something that we traditionally develop for a trial. So your consent form may not be the most effective way to get that communication to people. So developing and testing your messages and your ways of getting information is a step that you can take to make sure that your trial has successful recruitment. Those things take time, they take money. They take a lot of time, particularly engaging stakeholders. So just be prepared for those kinds of things. And like I say, you can build in those mini studies of the knowledge translation that you've been using or the patient engagement that you've been using that to inform your study as it is developed. And you can publish those things. So, got ahead of myself. What's helpful? This is a rough list that Tannis and I have just, in the experience that we've had in the CRU, have developed. So it's really helpful for an investigator to have a really good idea of what their responsibilities are. Often people will take their Tri-Council policy statement training or their good clinical practice training as a cursory online thing that they click through, and it's just a box checked, without realizing the full liability that goes along with that, and being realistic about the time that it takes. So that's an important thing for people to develop. And we realize that there's not necessarily a ton of ways that people can sort of get acquainted with those responsibilities. And so through the CRU, we don't have a dedicated sort of research-focused mentorship. There is mentorship available through CHRIM for investigators, but we are in the process of developing some of those things that we think will be helpful for investigators as they're getting started. And I don't want to limit this just to investigators. This is also something as research staff that you can use in your positions to make sure that you're using everything that's available in order to make your study successful. Relationships with collaborators are really important. We talked about teams, especially if you're going to need the cooperation of clinical staff. Talk to those people, talk to those department heads and those section heads and the staff. Particularly, many of our studies need the cooperation of nursing staff, and they don't really have a huge obligation to collaborate with us. So it's important to make sure that communication with them is respectful, realistic, and can be manageable for people. We also appreciate realism in their timelines, so to give us something and be like, I would like this to be done next week. That's not realistic, and I think people generally don't yet have a great understanding of how long some of these things can take. So the earlier you talk with us, the better, and we can sort of provide realistic expectations so that your trial can stay on track. Budgets, please come to us if you have a budget that you'd like to develop. We can help, particularly around staff time, and chart pulls, and things that like that, the nuts and bolts, because without the money to do it, is it going to happen? So being realistic about recruitment and about available data and how you think that that's going to get accessed, and then we can sort of problem solve from there. Timely communication is really important. Our staff are doing their best to be communicating consistently with investigators, and we realize that investigators and research staff have multiple responsibilities and obligations with their time, but if people can give us a good idea of what they can devote to their study, then we can be more responsive to that. Cohesive documentation is always great in terms of if you come to us and you say, I've got everything, here it is, but there's different names and we're not, and it's hard to piece together, that can be a stumbling block. We can work with you to sort of get your documents to a cohesive place, but a realistic understanding of that is great. And early involvement, that's today's theme. Early involvement is great for us. We just, in order to be as useful as we can, to be impacting child health and helping researchers be successful. Okay. So, hand it over to Tannis.
So we wanted to end today with some discussion with the group. So when Rachel talks about our feasibility assessment checklist, this is the first time we've endeavored to undertake a project like this. If anyone is interested in having a look at it and giving us feedback on, is there some elements that we have missed? Are we duplicating anything? Are we asking anything that's irrelevant? We'd like to hear back from our other research partners in Manitoba. We have our business cards here, so that'll give you our contact information. So if you're interested, please feel free to grab one and give us some contextual information back. We'd be very happy to receive that. And we just wanted to hear from the group. So this is the time for everyone to share their experiences. Like, what are your tips for clinical trial preparedness that either we maybe didn't mention today or we didn't emphasize enough today? And do you see any services for doing pediatric clinical research that are missing in Manitoba? Things that we currently don't provide or we haven't identified a partner in Manitoba that can provide? So we just like to open it up to the group for some feedback in those areas because we always want to learn. And like I said, our main goal is to make sure that our investigators are successful. We want to make sure we've got all the pieces in play in Manitoba to support them successfully. So any other tips for clinical trial preparedness that we didn't mention?
Question.
Yes. Oh, please. Yes, we're going to open to questions.
Do you guys have maybe a tip or a service, I'm not sure. Do you guys offer like technology, like iPads for rent, or do you have any experience with e-consent or any kind of technology infused trials that maybe you could share?
We have, so the question is around technology and how we've added it to our trials. We do have a couple of iPads. We don't have a rental process, it's a booking process. So
if my trial requires an iPad, you guys have them already?
We have 2 of them.
Okay.
So not a large amount. If we saw the need for additional ones, perhaps that's something we could look into, but we do have 2. We haven't done e-consent apart from using the ability within RedCap. So there's an ability to sign and do all that through the RedCap app. So another application or another way to do that, we haven't.
And just on maybe some of the other services, I know you're talking about developing some patient engagement, which is awesome. Is there gonna be like a knowledge broker facility there, like someone who can maybe help with like developing recruitment materials with like a youth group or putting on focus? Tell us about it, Rachel.
All right. So we're in the early stages of developing those supports, recognizing that that's where the future is essentially. And so the services that we're aiming to provide are like project consultations about how to involve stakeholders in your project, facilitating the recruitment and the meeting and the work of that group, developing some of those knowledge translation resources that guided by the group, and what was I missing? Just connecting our people with partners, so that like the practical stuff that you need in order to actually do it, because it tends to be time consuming, but also intensely important. Our intent in the future is to be developing both an adult and a youth advisory council at CRIM, so that this would be a resource available to researchers for some initial consultation, for some guidance, and then potential to participate in a more integrated way into projects as they come up. And so recognizing that not everybody has the time or the resources to do that on an on-project basis, we want that to be an institutional support that's available to people, particularly because patient engagement can seem kind of daunting or like, oh, that's not my field. We want to reduce the number of barriers in the way, because it is such an essential part of trial development and like conducting the trial and translating the results afterwards, so that the awesome stuff that we do in the research gets to the people who need that information. Does that answer your question?
How many people in the room work on pediatric trials? Oh, shocker here.
Yes.
You're talking mostly about the prospective studies and trials, and can you help with the retrospective studies, like data acquisition and working with all kind of institutions that all the bureaucracy that's
Yeah, the question is around whether we can help with retrospective reviews and chart reviews. Absolutely. We have a number of researchers that involve both. So they involve looking back as well as going forward. Either looking back can be in some of their control groups, but it can also be in their current patient populations. And as we mentioned earlier, we have various levels of research assistants that work with us, and we have the expertise to complete all the applications, and we know where to go for all of the accesses. If it's something that's just a simple data collection from an eChart or a CRU, we have a Tech 2, like Tech 2s, so at that level that can just go and grab the data. If it's something more complicated and we want to do a chart pull and do a chart review, depending on how complicated and medically intensive the information is, then we would assign a different staff level. But our overall goal is to assign a staff person who is at the right level, so that the trial or the study is not being charged for somebody who's already always at an RN rate, when really technician level 2 is the person we need to do that kind of work. So that's why we've got the broad range of staff that work in the CRU, so that we can match the right person with the right skill set to the right trial. But yes, we do have the expertise to go and find all the data that is required and how to complete all the access applications.
Related to that, do you provide any support around data sharing agreements?
Absolutely. Yeah, and we work closely, and we have a super good relationship with the contracts office and ORS at the University of Manitoba. So whether it's being run through an investigator that has a U of M affiliation or somebody that's just through HSC, we have experience. I have some experience writing all of these documents as well in my other, I only work half time for the CRU, my rest of the time I work for an innovative pediatric clinical trial network that's based here out of Winnipeg. And I developed all the contracts that were required for multi-center, multi-jurisdictional trials in Canada. With ORS, not by myself, but with ORS.
I almost forgot. What do you do the other half of the time?
Yes. Material transfer agreements, data transfer agreements, biosafety certificates of our lab, shared health lab, all of that stuff. Contracts with sponsors, yeah. Sub-site agreements when we're actually managing some investigator-initiated trials here that have sub-sites other places. So we're not always just responding to people's contracts. Right now we're negotiating contracts on behalf of an investigator who's here, negotiating the sub-site agreements at other sites. Yes.
We're both from radiology, and I was interested that you have a sonographic unit on site.
Yeah.
You have it. And who would run it if we?
We have a certified sonographer. Our equipment is checked by the biomedical safety group, the equipment group at HSC. So we partner with them for the verification, the yearly checks, the calibration. And then we have a fully qualified sonographer that works for us casually in conjunction with his full-time job at St. B.
Availability is usually quite good.
Yeah. Availability is good. He usually starts his shift at St. B at 11, so he's quite available early in the morning. Yeah. We don't do the full scale. We don't have all the heads for the unit, so we don't do the full range of tests that are available. So we are limited based on the heads we have. Yeah, and it was in response to certain endocrinology studies that we got involved in. So that was our initial response. So that's really what we're geared towards, is kidneys.
Yeah, because I think that there are definitely people in radiology who would be interested in collaborating in studies that needed sonography, and we probably have better equipment, better trained technologists, and more experience. So,
But we're using one of your technologists.
well, you said she's from St.
Well, yeah.
That's not one of our technologists. They don't do nearly as much pediatric sonography at St. B as we do.
The trouble that we've had, and I think the reason why that solution was developed before I started with the CRU, and the difficulty that we've experienced with some of the shared health services in the past, is that we cannot get access to the services for research participants.
No, I think that is a problem.
Yeah, so we've actually just had to drop an epilepsy study because we could not get access to an EEG. Simple as that. We had to withdraw, we had everything set up, we had drug on site. We were not allowed access to the EEG machine, we had to ship it all back and close the study.
No, I think it'd be worth, I guess what I'm saying is it'd be worth at least talking to us, find out if we could help.
Yeah, but really, I think it partially had to do too with when the new department head came on, there was a bit of and understandably, a move towards really trying to get money back for all the work that was done for research, because oftentimes radiologists got involved and ended somewhere on an article, but otherwise we're not fully compensated the way clinical work is getting done. And with that, some of the costs would increase dramatically. And I know a trial from one of the PIs that I worked with at that time was not run through the CRU, but where the MRIs or the MRS that was planned to be done ended up being a lot more expensive all of a sudden, even though all the funding and everything was already arranged. And yeah, I mean, imaging is always hard to get by from a logistical viewpoint. You and I know how busy you guys are just getting all the clinical stuff done, and oftentimes it's very hard to book patients or to plan patients, especially when they come from outside of the city and all the costs that are associated with that. So this was an example of something where we tried to sort of have a little more control over this specific entity of imaging. But of course, there's a lot of other things that we could not easily do. We cannot build it MRI in this hearing. So, but yeah,
No,
I absolutely think that talking to you guys about possibilities is on our mind, and it's something that we would attend our potential PIs to.
So, and I have a question. That is that we're interested in thinking about developing the research program, radiation dosimetry, radiation projection. We have a couple of projects in mind. Would it be helpful for us to come and talk to you about how you go about developing a research program, not just specific?
Absolutely.
Good, thank you.
Alex?
Thank you very much. Very enjoyable presentation. I wanted to ask about beyond data collection screening, after you got the results, do you at any point provide services for data as to where it's better to disseminate the findings of the results?
So the knowledge translation of the
Yeah,
academic findings of the scientific findings. No,
Because you have connections, you have there.
yeah, sorry. So the question's been asked about whether we provide sort of the end of grant knowledge translation services around dissemination of results. And the short answer is no, not yet. We have had a few questions for that. So the two areas that some of our investigators have been asking about lately is around database creation and data management plans, and then the further on is statistical analysis. So we have not actually hired any staff in those areas because these requests have been quite sporadic, but we've started to make partnerships with people that can create that. We've also started to engage in conversations with CHI to make it easier for investigators to get a database developed for a reasonable cost and that sort of thing. So those are early discussions with CHI because they manage the REDCap application here at the University of Manitoba. And we don't want to duplicate, like Rachel said earlier, we don't want to duplicate any services. The other service that we have been asked for is just around submitting abstracts as well as manuscripts to publications, because there's a lot of just administrative type of work that once you've decided what journal to submit it to is around how to just do the, the formatting and get it all ready and get all your pieces up on their website. Yeah.
Type in every author's name and
Yeah, I know. So we are looking at providing some administrative services for that. The other piece around where to go and how to administer it touches on the mentorship program that CRIM has. So CRIM has an overall mentorship program for new investigators, and it does really focus on their academic career and helps them manage the university academic system. We'd like to engage them in future conversations to help to add a component to that around program of research development or research study development. And through that mentorship program, I think is where we can start to help them identify where to go to share their findings, what manuscripts would give them, the best coverage and the best exposure, and conferences to go to and things like that. So I think that's how we would target it, rather than having an in-house person. It would maybe just enhancing other services that CRIM currently has and connecting them with other people.
CHI also has a knowledge translation platform, and they're a great resource as well. With some of the patient engagement stuff that we're going to be developing, their patient engagement can work closely with knowledge translation to be disseminating results to more of a public audience rather than an academic one, which can sort of cut down on that time between the results of the study actually influencing the care that patients receive. So that will be something that will be available as the patient engagement support increases at CRIM.
Excellent. I think we were right on time. Thanks, everyone. Our next SOPR rounds is do we have October 1st. Perfect. Our next round is October 1st. It's going to be held in conjunction with CHI Grand Rounds. We have Ryan Zaranchansky, which I'm sure is probably not a new name for most of you all here, who will be talking about his Rewarding Success Initiative. So the emails will go out relatively soon, so it is in just a couple of weeks, October 1st. Print that in your brain, and we will see you all then. Oh, and if you haven't signed the sheets yet, there's one up here, but I think there was another one circulating. Oh, perfect. Great, thanks, guys. Thank you.